10th president. Our live program on John Tyler airs Monday morning at 9 Eastern here on C-SPAN. Now from Belgrade, coverage of Day 51 of the NATO airstrikes on Yugoslavia from state-controlled Serbian television. This newscast was recorded yesterday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern and translated at C-SPAN here in Washington, D.C. It's about a half hour.
You're watching primetime news of Radio Television Serbia. Respected viewers, on the occasion of the 13th of May, the Day of Security, the personal envoy of the President of Yugoslavia and the Supreme Commander Slobodan Milosevic, the Republic's Prime Minister Milan Marjanovic, gave highest commendations to security forces members. At the ceremony in Belgrade, he said that the members of the police showed high professionalism and heroism in stopping the escalation of terrorism and separatism in Kosovo that culminated with the NATO aggression against our country. For their courage, determination and professionalism, as well as in their disciplined carrying out of all the tasks, where they served as example for all of the other members of the police. The President of the Republic of Yugoslavia, Milosevic, gave commendations to 30 officers and non-commissioned officers of the police forces of Serbia. These commendations were given by his envoy, Mirko Marjanovic, President of the Government of Serbia. For 50 days, our country has been defending its freedom, territorial integrity and sovereignty from NATO aggressors. They don't choose any instruments or goals, these NATO criminals who try to give us as much in terms of casualties and damage of our economy. The killing of civilians, the destruction of cities, of hospitals, of roads, of children's schools and other civilian facilities show very clearly that the real goal of NATO alliance is to destroy our country and our people. Together with the army of Yugoslavia and our people, courageously defending the territorial integrity and sovereignty from the evil aggressor, the members of the police forces of Yugoslavia do not spare their lives in order to fulfill their tasks in terms of defense of the country and protect the public order and peace. With their professionalism, energy and courage, the members of police have stood against separatism and terrorism in Kosovo that culminated in the NATO aggression against our country, at the same time securing peace for the people throughout Serbia. You successfully managed to accomplish all tasks with respect for the law, equality of all people, regardless of their ethnicity or religious beliefs, and during these days of aggression and suffering of civilian people, you expressed high patriotism, determination and humanity. Our citizens know this and respect this. The Prime Minister Milanovic stressed that the order of the High Command regarding the partial withdrawal of the forces from Kosovo is one more proof of the orientation of the Yugoslav leadership to find political means for all problems. At the same time, we are not less determined to defend our country from the aggressor. And the greatest guarantee for this is the heroism of the members of the police as well as the army, as well as the high patriotism of the citizens. At the end, the Prime Minister wished to all members of the police forces to continue accomplishing their tasks, but in peace. On the same occasion, the Minister of Internal Affairs, Vlajko Stoljković, gave appropriate commemorative gifts to 940 police officers of Serbia, who were particularly distinguished in the defense of the country, in the fight against terrorism, and fulfillment of all security tasks. Promotion into higher ranks were given to 370 members of the police and 172 officers, as well as 307 non-commissioned officers. I would say that these are heroes of our people, or one number of the heroes of our people, because there are more members of the police who are also professional, successful, and work in accordance with the law and the Constitution, and who have defended our country and have efficiently broken the members of the terrorist gangs of the Albanian separatists. I wish you all the best in the future work and in your life, to all of the members of the police and to our people and the country. a better future for everyone, because we shall manage to successfully defend ourselves from the aggressor and find a peaceful solution to the problems in accordance with the interests of our people. On behalf of the decorated officers, Captain Petar Radenovic read a message of gratitude. I want to express our great gratitude to all of the members of the police who gave their lives in the defense of the country against the NATO aggressor, in their fight against terrorism, and in all of their tasks pertaining to security issues for the good of Serbia and its citizens. We send the message that under the Supreme Commander and the President of Yugoslavia, Slobodan Milosevic, we shall manage to preserve our freedom, territorial integrity and sovereignty, and continue our uncompromising fight against the remnants of the terrorist gangs in Kosovo, all kinds of criminal behavior and all kinds of dangers for the citizens. We shall manage to protect the order and law and improve safety despite the war and this criminal bombardment. Ceremonies regarding this same issue will be held in various secretariats of the police, with more commendations to distinguished officers. The General Secretary of the Socialist Party of Serbia, Gorica Gajevic, sent on behalf of this party and in her own name greetings to the members of the police on the occasion of 13th of May, the Day of Security Forces. This message notes that the members of the police, with their courage, dedication and professional skills, managed to prevent the enemy in their intentions, just as all our citizens support the police forces so that they can persevere in fulfilling the task of protecting the sovereignty, territorial integrity, independence and the constitutional order of our country. The Directorate of Yugoslav Left Party congratulates to the members of the police forces and the security forces that defend the country with their citizens on their heroic stance in front of this violence that has been committed by the 19 most developed countries of the world. All of the freedom-loving countries of the world admire this patriotism. For future generations, it will be a lesson of honor that will enter all the schools of history. Members of the police and security forces were also congratulated on the Day of the Security by the Ministry of Information, by the President of the Interim Executive Council of Kosovo, Zoran Anđelković, by the head of the parliamentary group of YUL in the Federal Assembly, Živko Šoklovački, by the regional board of the Socialist Party of Serbia, Nedeljko Šipovac, and by the president of the Young Socialist, Aleksandar Rastović, as well as by the Federal Board of Subnor. The defense of the country from the NATO aggressors and the resolution of all problems in Kosovo by political means are our main tasks, stressed the Minister of Internal Affairs of Serbia, Vlajko Stojiljković, during his visit to one of the police units that came back from Kosovo today. Acting in accordance with the order of the Supreme Command on partial withdrawal from Kosovo, one of the police units came back from Pristina. The Minister of Internal Affairs, Vlajko Stojiljković, together with his closest associates, visited this unit. Mr. Minister, the unit of police forces that has just returned from accomplishing security tasks in Kosovo is ready for your inspection. Reporting to you, Lieutenant Colonel Duško Adamović. Fellow policemen, I greet you. Congratulating the policemen today's holiday on behalf of the Ministry of Internal Affairs, Minister Stojiljković stressed that the members of the police successfully conducted their tasks of protecting the territorial integrity and sovereignty of the Republic, breaking up the gangs of the Albanian terrorists and separatists, and the protection of the property and the lives of the citizens. Our two major tasks at this moment is to defend our country from the NATO aggressors measures and to resolve all problems in Kosovo by political means, stressed the Minister of Internal Affairs. After the ceremony, Minister Stoljković held a discussion with some of the members of this unit. On the occasion of the 13th of May, Day of Security, at the Cemetery of Distinguished Citizens in Belgrade, new wreaths were laid at the graves of Slobodan Krcun, Svetolik Lazarević and Aleksandar Ranković by the Ministry of the Internal Affairs of Serbia, headed by Major General Mišić, who is Deputy Minister. Also near Lazarevac, a place where the legendary Slobodan Krcun, first head of the Serbian police, tragically lost his life in 1964, as well as Svetolik Lazarević. New wreaths were laid by delegation of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. At the grave of Colonel Milorad Simić, who was deputy to the Minister of Internal Affairs, on the occasion of the Day of the Security, also at the Cemetery of Distinguished Citizens, a new wreath was laid by the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Those present were Colonel Milorad Simić, Colonel Mirko Božić and Major Zoran Alimpić. The commander of the Combat Navy Forces of Yugoslavia, Vice Admiral Zec, received the captain of a combat boat, Miladin Vujanovic, and his colleagues, who reported to him on all of the measures of the security forces in these very complex war conditions. It was stated that the skills, professionalism and morale of these units are at the highest level. The federal government considered today the current economic and security situation in the country and decided on additional measures for functioning of the economy in war conditions. One of the decisions was to issue Federation bonds against debts of the banks who had given loans to agricultural workers and people involved in tourism. The federal government also made a decision that out of the federal reserves, a certain quantity of fuel, medicine and food be loaned to various producers. Also, the federal government said that they would undertake all legal measures in order to implement all of the regulations regarding payment transactions around the country due to irregularities in these transactions, especially in terms of securing funding for the budget. In regard to the defense expenses, it was also noted that the government of Montenegro from June of last year to April 21st of this year failed to provide into the federal budget 354 million dinars regarding the special tax that was intended for the army of Montenegro. There were additional 32,280 dinars less that had been supplied by Montenegro. Also, new visa regulations are in effect regarding Italy on a reciprocity basis in order to prevent uncontrolled entry of people from a country that's actively participating in an aggression against our country. The airplanes of the criminal alliance began a 20-minute attack on the area of Niš at around 2:45 p.m., aiming at various targets in the northwestern zone of the city. One could hear a lot of explosions, but also our anti-aircraft units responded. The aggressors attacked with 2 missiles an overpass on a road to Skopje, close to Trupalski forest, as well as the area of Jastrebac with 4 missiles. They also attacked an overpass at Batušnica, west of Niš. According to the first information, 1 missile hit the entry of Žitovađe, close to the local church. Just as 2 days earlier, the target of the enemy alliance was once again the Leskovac area. For a 5th time, at 2:47 p.m., they bombed the village of Sinkovce, this time with 4 strong missiles of the criminal alliance. Another place, Arapova Dolina, was hit by 1 missile. Strong explosions caused a lot of material damage to already damaged houses in this area. According to our information, there are no human casualties. Throughout the night and the day, the airplanes of NATO aggressors continued their deadly attack in Kosovo. This time, they attacked an industrial zone in Prizren, Trepča's metal factory Samipa, the textile industry Printax, the winery complex Kosovo Vin at Mala Kruša, a railroad facility, construction depot, as well as part of the roads that connect this town with the economic center of Kosovo. There is huge material damage because they have destroyed production plants, storage facilities, and a government building. The relentless missile attack continued today since the morning, especially the roads towards Đakovica, the checkpoint Vrbnica on the Yugoslav-Albanian border, but also in the very center of Prizren. But it was only a matter of chance. The missile didn't explode, and thus human catastrophe was averted. The area of village Petrovčić, neighboring Zemun, was also hit by a missile. In Uroševac, sometime after 12, the NATO alliance hit with missiles the area of the villages of Gornja Nerodimlje, Manastirica, and Kamena Glava. The airplanes of the alliance also bombarded this morning several villages in the northeastern part of Đakovica. And half an hour later, they also hit a border village of Vogovo, but there are no military targets any place near that village. The air alert in this area that began yesterday afternoon is still in effect. Last night, the aggressor alliance attacked several other cantons in Kosovo. First, around 7:20 in the evening, they attacked Srbica. 2 hours later, they hit with a missile the area of Dičani. 55 minutes after midnight, they hit the border area from Dečani towards Čakovica. At the same time, 3 enemy missiles hit the area of the village of Slovin near Lipljan, also the area of Kutlovac near the neighborhood Stari Trg in Kosovska Mitrovica. Last night, the aggressor was also using those forbidden cluster bombs, especially in the area between Uroševac and Pristina. They hit the railroad station and the motel Putnik in Prizren. After that attack, and this was exclusively a civilian target, there was a big fire. This morning around 4:10, NATO aggressors with 2 missiles once again hit the buildings of TV Novi Sad, already attacked on the 3rd of May. The building which houses the newsroom, which had shown programs in 6 languages, as well as about 20 vehicles, are completely destroyed. Truth and truthful information have been bombed again. Another missile hit a house whose owner, fortunately, has left. Although shrapnel and bits of the destroyed objects flew in a radius of about half a mile, there were no injured civilians, but there is a huge material damage. 1 minute later, the road along Jidiški Venac was also hit, and now it is closed for traffic. The State Duma of Russia has begun the discussion regarding the impeachment procedure against President Boris Yeltsin. The delegates will discuss this proposal made by the left parties today and tomorrow. The vote on the confidence to Yeltsin is expected on Saturday. The State Duma was presented with a report by the Special Commission charged to check the formal, procedural and legal justification of the impeachment proceedings against Yeltsin. Yeltsin is charged with the fall of Soviet Union, the attack on the parliament in '93, the war in Chechnya, the dissolution of the Russian army and the genocide over the Russian people. Most analysts had until a few days ago thought that the initiators of the procedure will have very great difficulty in gathering 300 out of the 450 votes which are necessary for justifying this impeachment procedure. However, President of Duma Gennady Seleznyov stated today that the chances for Yeltsin's impeachment are much greater because of his decision yesterday to change Primakov. Still, against this assurance stands the fact that the Liberal Democratic Group of Zhirinovsky said they would support the president because they do not want Russia, who is currently without government, to stay without president. At the same time, there are protests in Russia. demonstrators asking for change of Yeltsin. Russia and France agree on principal questions for the 21st century regarding the strengthening of the world security and the system of the UN. However, there remain many disagreements on substantive questions regarding the regulation of the Kosovo crisis. This is the general conclusion after the meeting between Yeltsin and the French President Chirac, who parted with the conviction that differences in opinion can be narrowed through negotiations. They also founded a Russo-French committee for consultations on, as they noted officially, the parameters of the political regulation of the Kosovo crisis. Otherwise, if the bombing continues, if, despite the active efforts of Russia to resolve this crisis, the West and NATO will not adequately react, Yeltsin repeated to the French President Chirac the following, that Russia will have to re-examine its position in the negotiation process regarding Kosovo and to make much more energetic steps in order to protect its strategic interests in the Balkans. Russia does not want to be a passive observer of the bombardment of Yugoslavia. The special envoy of the Russian President Chernomyrdin, after his meeting with the Deputy Secretary of State Strobe Talbot, expressed a conviction that the military operations of NATO can be stopped despite the fact that the bombing is intensifying. It is essential that we, Belgrade and the NATO countries, we agree on the basis and the principles of the political resolution of the crisis. We are trying to agree and we will stop the war. Now it's important to come to principle agreement of the interested parties for political solution. Talbot said that between Moscow and Washington there are not big misunderstandings. We found a way to deepen our mutual understanding and narrow our differences. Chinese media give a lot of publicity today to the positions of China regarding the Kosovo crisis that were stated yesterday during the discussion with the German Chancellor Schröder. Chinese President Jiang Zemin stated that the immediate end of the NATO bombardment of Yugoslavia is the main prerequisite to return to negotiations. The Chinese president also noted the other position that any plan for political solution requires the consent of Yugoslavia. Schröder said that he also met the Prime Minister Zhuo, noting that despite differences, he agreed with the Chinese side that the discussion should return to the UN Security Council as soon as possible. The Prime Minister said that China, as a permanent member of UN Security Council, will not concede to any plan unless the NATO bombing is over. The leading daily Zhibao says today that NATO, led by Washington, has nailed itself to the column of shame of the world history by committing bloody, evil deeds in Yugoslavia in a sharply worded editorial. The Daily accuses NATO in service of the American military machine as an anti-civilizational creation that shows the dark and rotten face of Western civilization. What America does with NATO by beastly bombarding Yugoslavia is a gross violation of human civilization. American government denies that the bombardment of the Chinese embassy, of the train, are barbaric acts. If this is not barbarism, what is barbarism? They try in vain to justify this bombing because this bombing, as well as the attack on the Chinese embassy, shows a deranged cruelty and monstrosity. Although the street protests in China have calmed down, and many companies and universities and schools, they continue to express their dissatisfaction and bitterness regarding the American policy and demand the fulfillment of China's requests. China continues to monitor the events with its declared contingency right that if those demands are not met, it can take appropriate measures in response. They mean especially America. China once again warned the USA to respond to the demands regarding the bombardment of the Chinese embassy in Belgrade. Washington cannot abnegate its responsibility and give unreasonable explanations. Washington has the greatest responsibility for the bombing of the Chinese embassy, a brutal act against Chinese sovereignty and violation of the rights of 1,200,000,000 Chinese. NATO, led by the USA, has to take all responsibility for this brutal attack. The apologies so far cannot be accepted by the Chinese people. Several hundred demonstrators gathered in front of the US Embassy in Cambodia, in Phnom Penh, to express their dissatisfaction because of the attack on the Chinese Embassy in Belgrade. They called out, "Kill Clinton, death to Americans, NATO terrorists." Chinese who work in Canada also protested against the consulate of the US in Montreal. They also asked for end of the bombing and for punishment of those responsible. Kostas Simitis, Prime Minister of Greece, directly attacked the role of the US in this part of Europe. Distancing himself from the continuation of the bombing of Yugoslavia, Simitis said that he had just telephoned Tony Blair asking for an immediate end of the war. Today's editorials of leading Greek papers note that for the first time since the beginning of the aggression, one of the alliance members directly distances itself from the politics of force. There was an obvious support by the daily Exclusia with an article that read, "The anti-NATO bombardment of Simitis." They said that Greece is principled in thinking that bombs cannot resolve anything, including the problems in Kosovo, with a clear pleasure because of Simitis' stance, which somehow recalls the historic position of PASOK. The daily Tovima stresses that Europe missed its chance to put its stamp on this crisis and became a victim of a crisis whose brunt it must bear. Europe has expressed a great political impotence, reconciling silently with the presence of one world power, a self-appointed ruler of the world, which is a mistake in and of itself. At the same time, Yorgos Papandreou, Foreign Minister of Greece, yesterday at a press conference in Athens, conceded to the failure of NATO, stating that not a single political goal has been reached and that were stated by the NATO alliance, despite this 5-week bombardment. Papandreou, at the same time, noted the contradictory position of the US. On the one hand, they have signed the G8 plan in Bonn. On the other hand, they continue to pressure Belgrade and intensify the air operations. In Germany, in an atmosphere of strong upheaval, there was an extraordinary session of the Green Party, coalition partner of the Socialist Democrats. The theme is Kosovo crisis and the NATO aggression. The head of diplomacy, Josef Fischer, tried to justify the bombardment, but his colleagues interrupted him with cries, "Murderer, warmonger, hypocrite." Fischer could barely reach the podium with bodyguards who protected him from opponents of the aggression that Germany has taken part in, violating its own constitution. Visibly upset and still soiled by color paint thrown at him, Fischer said that he will refuse the resolution of part of this party demanding immediate end of the war. Many of the representatives condemned the beastly bombing of civilian targets in Serbia and the destruction of infrastructure. The Green Party must declare itself against this war, said Barbie Can, adding that temporary halt in the bombing is insufficient. The police had full hands both inside the hall and outside, where several thousand people continue to protest against Fischer's policy. Protestants threw bottles and paint. The police responded with batons. 60 demonstrators were arrested. The British Prime Minister Blair was given a special recognition today in the German city of Aachen for his contribution towards unified Europe. This award has been given only once before to a British politician, Winston Churchill. The ceremony was spoiled by many demonstrators who greeted the guest from England with cries, "There is no reward for war, you're a murderer." London Guardian says that despite the crisis, the diplomatic package is there, and the major proposal is that of the G8 country. A Cambridge University professor, in a letter to Daily Telegraph, warns that the aggression against Yugoslavia is not a war by Britain, but Blair's war and Clinton's war. The dissatisfaction is greater every day, says Independent. Commentator close to the government tried to prepare the public for the defeat, suggesting that Blair had wished for the best, but Clinton did not listen to him. The Milano paper Corriere della Sera says that maybe NATO does possess intelligence bombs, but the political intelligence is only with the Yugoslav President Slobodan Milosevic. After the bombing of the Chinese embassy in Belgrade, President Milosevic used the opportunity and the weakness of NATO to announce partial withdrawal from Kosovo. This is a move in the right direction. Belgrade shows good force, goodwill, but this war is an obvious defeat of NATO. Italian unions declared a general strike against the aggression, asking for an immediate end of the bombardment. The unions were joined by many peace organizations. After their gathering, they held a protest march throughout many Italian cities with numerous slogans against NATO and the bombardment. They also sent a message to the government asking it for an immediate end of the aggression. The government in Italy is also facing the attacks on the headquarters of the Party of the Left of Massimo D'Alema. The headquarters of NATO at Brussels conceded that the decision of the Supreme Command of Yugoslavia on partial withdrawal from Kosovo is really being followed. Today, they had to really declare the truth. Foreign journalists, for the first time, were witnesses of the return of the units. The French writer and philosopher Régis Debray, through the French journals, sent a message to Jacques Chirac that his politics towards Kosovo and Yugoslavia is on the wrong track. Debray visited Belgrade, Vranje and Kosovo and convinced himself that what he saw there doesn't correspond to the words that Chirac uses in order to describe the events and justify the aggression. The famous French writer reminds the French of de Gaulle's definition of NATO as an organization that means subordination of Europe to the US.
Coming up next, the Pentagon